So last week, the Sunday Times top 100 companies honored co-founder of Wiphold and chair of the Solidarity Fund, Gloria Tomatoe Serobe, with the Lifetime Achievement Award for her decades-long contribution to business and empowerment. She's the first woman awardee for this honor that's previously been bestowed to late former President Nelson Mandela, Adriaan, Gore and Patrice Motsepe. She joins us now to tell us what this means for her. A very good day to you, Ms. Serobe, and thank you so much for making the time. I suppose congratulations are in order. Congratulations are in order.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Remember, the award is for all of us. It can only go to one woman, but it's for all of us, for all the things we're trying to do.
So at the event, it was said that your efforts at social transformation and the use of inclusive economic models to uplift the marginalized rural women were some of the considerations in choosing you for this honor. What does this mean for you?
What it means, Desiree, is that we are in a better privileged position in the sense that we are in business, and so we can hear the voices from both sides. That is from the high net worth individuals to the poor rural people. We sit in these boards, whether it's the bank boards or it's the forestry boards. So our job is to translate these things and see how they can be made useful to actually include people who have been excluded before. And big that number are the people from the rural areas, because that was deliberately done by the previous government. They were taken out of the system. And so we have to force the boundaries and make sure they are included. That is women, blacks, and that is rural people. Remember this, the issue of women, though, is not a South African problem only, it's a worldwide problem. So we have to be deliberate about how we include women into the mainstream of the economy. But South Africa specific, it also turns out that the rural areas, because the husbands are out there working, most of the people who are there are women who are bearing the brunt of that poverty. So it has been a coincidence for us that while we're addressing the issue of women and also in the rural areas, we bump into these widows or the wives who are just being the breadwinners there because the husbands are not there. So it has been in that sense that we ended up with this inclusive economy thing. Last point is that the rural economy, nobody wants to touch this thing. It's quite hard how to make it work. But 32% of the country is rural. And so we can't move the needle in South Africa until we actually fix that part of it. And so our curiosity about the rural areas is pretty much about that.
So I'm proud to say that I was one of the first service providers of Wiphold when it started in the recruitment space then. And I remember how inspirational this was. Why was it important for 4 women to come together to start a big impact company at a time when most women were still trying to figure out what is this democracy all about?
Well, we saw our male colleagues doing it, and they had good reception from the captains of industry, because men are quite happy to talk to each other about business. But for some reason, they are uncomfortable to talk to women about business. And so we just thought that instead of complaining and whinging, let's just do it. Let's start a woman's company. But secondly, for it to work for us, it was very important that it is broad. It includes every woman in South Africa. If you remember those road shows, every woman in South Africa, the rich one, the poor one, the middle, rural, urban, had the opportunity to join Wiphold. We made it that way. And that's why we did that. If you remember that initial public offer to women, it was to all the women in the country. And incidentally, also just to mention both black and white women. And so it was very key for us that we rely on the numbers of women to come on board, shift the boundaries and make the immediate impact, because we have the numbers, we don't have the resources. We are not in the mainstream economy, but we are the biggest consumers. We make purchasing decisions, including what your husband is wearing, isn't it? And your children and everyone. But what we are not is being the players in the mainstream economy. We actually thought that that purchasing power can be converted to a mighty power in terms of being in the mainstream economy. And that's why we opened it to just about anyone who wanted to come on board.
So your impact and relevance still continue. A pandemic hits the world. South Africa scuppers around for responses. You are roped in to lead one of the most impactful organizations in the fight against COVID, the Solidarity Fund. What was that like, and what lessons were learned?
Quite interesting there is that I was surprised that I could lean on the learnings of Wiphold, for example, even as I was dealing with COVID, because remember, we had to include everyone in terms of the solution. COVID actually hit everyone, poor, black, white, rich, you name it, everyone was exposed to it. And so our solutions had to be inclusive. Otherwise, it was going to be quite a funny situation where people are just transmitting to each other anyway. So the whole issue of making sure the testing is done in the rural areas, the vaccinations are also going there. Where people can't go to East London, we take them to their villages, make sure they have the vaccinations, everything, the PPEs, you name it. We had to make sure that we cover everyone. And the lesson from COVID, though, Desiree, which is your question, is that it was, firstly, it was the first in the world where the government and business and civil society meet to deal with a challenge of any nature, and South Africa shines quite high on that. It hasn't been done anywhere. That's why the Solidarity Fund is very unique. But secondly, everyone in South Africa, whether it is the money or it's the resources or it's the availability or people volunteered, they threw themselves at this to make it work. Then what was left for us as the COVID leaders, as a board, as the management, was to make sure that we don't betray the trust of these people, who they have taken their last money to make sure that this thing can be dealt. And for that, the integrity in the system was very important, that there must be no money lost, at least not under our name. And so our governance had to take care of the fact that even though it's a crisis thing, we have to make decisions every day. Mm-hmm. We had to make sure that there are no governance processes that are skipped, and that the board of directors, where the delegations of authority are sitting with the board of directors, the board then had to meet every week so that nobody can say, I had to do something outside of the board powers because the board was going to meet in the next 3 months. And that time you have to buy the needles, you have to buy the sanitizers, you have to go and fetch things from China or wherever, you have to go and get ventilators. Yeah. You couldn't then have the excuse to do this without following the rules. That's the lesson that one learned, that it can be done even if you are in an emergency situation, you can follow governance.
So you are not a leader in isolation. South Africa is currently seeking solutions and answers to economic growth challenges, energy transition, energy challenges. Just last week, there's been a conversation about something that Wiphold has mastered, the upliftment of Black societies with the Black economic empowerment. Where do you see yourself in these conversations, and what gaps do you see in the approaches that South Africa is taking?
This is one time, Desiree, legacy is everything now. So I'm 63, Louisa is 65, Wendy is also around that age. And so very soon we will not have the same impact as we had 30 years ago. And so what our job is to make sure that the model we're trying to do here is tailored down to the younger professionals. It's very difficult, Desiree, to be inclusive. That's why people avoid it. It's very difficult to carry so many women on your shoulders, and you have to make sure that nobody's found wanting. It's not easy. It requires community facilitation. As more you go to the rural areas, you are changing the lives of these people, even in the way they live. And so you have to be there physically and actually be this teacher 24 hours a day. It's very difficult, but we have to pass that lesson to the younger professionals, to the younger, because it can only be good for South Africa.
Yeah.
And as difficult as it is, yeah.
You speak about your age. Your story is one of grit and inspiration. And I know the word mentor is overused, but it is so necessary for men and for women. What is the biggest thing that holds people back, these young people, South Africans, that you say we look to for leadership for the future? What are the things that hold them back?
So, as I have seen it, the thing that's holding them back, Desiree, is that we now forget that as time goes, the leader of today was probably maybe born 1985, 1986, right? He is 36, and he could be a CEO of a bank, a big, mighty platform. But because he is born in 1986, he knows very little about how that apartheid system worked. And therefore, he does not have the wherewithal to untie these knots because he doesn't quite know it. So our job, as one who have lived in both worlds, I have the experience of living under apartheid. I know what it means to live under the system, and I know what was wrong and what was done to exclude people. For example, the fact that women could not own land, or you could not go to Wits University until you get a permission from the minister of something, then I can't remember. The young professional today gets shocked every time you tell them this. So what they are lacking, if you were to ask me, is that history. What we have is that history. So mentorship on our side has not become a luxury now, it is a necessary thing. Because you are going to blame them for not helping with transformation simply because they know very little about exactly what's being transformed. So our mentorship has got to be directional, has got to be intentional, has got to be a storytelling, because we are fixing a system that is quite unique to South Africa. You know, apartheid has no reference. You can't say there's a book, read it. And so we have to talk about what exactly was done to exclude people, and therefore, what must you do as a CEO of a bank to include people? And you can only do that if you know what you are undoing. And this is quite a key thing for me. And then I think the last point, Desiree, I wanted to say, I'm glad young people like you are running businesses like this hard. We have to tell young professionals, we do not have the luxury not to work. We don't have the luxury not to use ourselves to rearrange South Africa. We don't have the luxury to be idle housewives simply because your husband has got the money to look after you. I'm saying this deliberately, knowing that the professionals are going to kill me on this. People have got to understand that the battle for transformation and for women empowerment is far, 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 far from over. Our predecessors, they did their best in terms of the political emancipation. We've got this huge mammoth task of the economic emancipation, and we have no luxury to stay at home. We can't.
And on that instructive note, we congratulate you once again and thank you so much for making the time there. Gloria Tomatoe Serobe, co-founder of Wiphold and chairperson of the Solidarity Fund, last Thursday honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award.